Hi, I'm Connor Jones.
I'm Micah Tomasella.
And this is Culture Brief, a Denison-informed podcast where we navigate the constant stream of top stories and news, politics, sports, pop culture, technology, and yeah, we're doing it all from a Christian perspective. Micah, happy Thursday. Do you want to just give us a rundown on what we're going to be talking about today?
Hey, Connor. Yes, we're going to talk about Pride Month. We're going to talk about Ukraine's recent drone attack and its effect on modern warfare. We're going to play a fun Would You Rather game. We're going to call it Would You Rather with Micah and CJ, nickname pending approval. And then we're going to talk about, hey, what's going on with Elon? Something's going on with Elon. We're going to dive into that a little bit and so much more. So let's jump into The Brief.
The Brief. Okay, well, Micah, as you know, every June, America is awash with rainbow flags as Pride Month begins. And it is a very big deal for a lot of people. It's very big in our culture, so we just felt the need to kind of go ahead and discuss this up front. And we're going to lean into some of the articles that have been written by Dr. Jim Dennison, the co-founder here, because he's done a lot of research, a lot of writing on this. We've got other staff members who have written entire books on sexuality and homosexuality. For years,
our ministry has been on the forefront of this.
Yep. Absolutely. So, and I'll even be linking some of those resources in our show notes, but it's still very much ingrained in our culture. That being said, I do think it has tamed down in this kind of June compared to last year, but really compared to 2 or 3 years ago when we were in the middle of kind of the heat of what I would say was the cancel culture, critical theory, DEI, pride, just like everything about those topics was huge and really pervasive in our culture. I think that started to tame down a bit, and you've seen that in some of what we've already witnessed with companies kind of staying away. And so I'm going to give some examples here, but Mike, specifically, do you remember 2023? This was the big year. The Bud Light and Target backlash that happened.
I absolutely remember. I remember what happened with Dylan Mulvaney, who is kind of like a trans spokesperson for Bud Light, but for like kind of, I mean, it wasn't for the whole company. It was like a small part, but it ended up tanking Bud Light for a long time until they were able to kind of resurrect themselves. And then with Target, I remember that one kind of vividly, just because I have children and just kind of the different things that they were putting in their stores during Pride Month a couple of years ago. And just gosh, man, what a cultural moment that was. Then it was just a couple of years ago.
It was. And that's what I'm saying. That was kind of the peak when these companies were all trying to go so far and it started to come back down. I think a lot of that's because of the backlash that a bunch of companies got, but also I really believe the election this past November was a big piece of this because the American populace kind of rejected a lot of this in the way that they voted, not just nationally, but also in local elections. They ousted a lot of people who were trying to force things upon children in schools and athleticism, like in different sports, all of that. So, we saw a lot change in the last probably 6 to 7 months since the election, including a lot of this stuff, and companies are starting to pull back. So, Target, they really suffered financially. And back in 2023, they were doing that sale of really trans-focused products. And PR Daily noted that, and they said that they also faced criticism for dialing back now their DEI efforts. So they're trying to find this like balance of pleasing people on the left, pleasing people on the right. And Target has said from a spokesperson that as we have for many years, we will continue to mark Pride Month by offering an assortment of celebratory products. But my God, I was doing some research, and these products this year are only available online or in select stores. And even in those select stores, the displays are very small. If you remember in 2023, they were like, when you walked in a store, they were right up front. It was
like the first thing you saw.
Right. Yeah. So now they've completely kind of stepped away from that in a grander scale. Bud Light, as we've said, they changed course. Their marketing is now, if you see their TV commercial and all of that, is basically sports and male-oriented stuff. It's like Post Malone and Shane Gillis on commercials, and they're trying to, advertise with sports teams and UFC fighting, all of that. So they've completely changed course there. And then Disney's in a similar boat. They still host massive Pride celebrations at their parks. They're still very big on Pride, but they've pulled back in a lot of their content because there was so much backlash to kids' content having homosexual characters or Pride-focused things, including 2022, that movie Lightyear that came out, the Pixar movie. It had a same-sex kiss in it, and they got a lot of backlash for that, and that movie ended up flopping, and it's very possible that was a big piece of the reason why, and so they've learned their lesson. One big one that I noticed that's different this year is NASCAR. So last year, NASCAR, remember, this is a very Southern sport, very conservative fan base for the most part. They tweeted last year, "Happy Pride, NASCAR is proud to support LGBTQ plus community." That got a lot of backlash on that tweet last year. And they had a rainbow flag in their post and everything. This year, silence, nothing, not a mention. So it makes me wonder two things. Did they post last year or any time in the past? Same with a bunch of companies, but the NASCAR post in the past for fear of being ridiculed or like chastised and potentially canceled? Or did they say, this year we still want to support Pride initiatives, but we don't really want to deal with the backlash of what their fan base said last year? It's kind of puts them in a weird position. And I think it begs the question for all of these companies, are they all just scared of being canceled or boycotted if they don't say anything? Is that what it was in the past? Was it all just optics? Or did the leaders of these organizations actually believe and support Pride initiatives? I really don't know. I think it's hard to know. A lot of this comes down to dollars and cents. What's going to make them money? What's going to prevent boycotts? What's going to get people in their stores? Who are they trying to please? Is it ever actually their values at the company? I mean, what are your thoughts on all that?
I just think it doesn't come off genuine, like when a company like Target, we're mentioning just a few companies here, guys. I mean, if you just want to Google this topic, you're talking hundreds of front-facing companies that are switching up, at least slightly changing their strategy, some completely overhauling their strategy of how they're approaching Pride Month and how they're marketing it and how they're talking about it. It just doesn't come across genuine, and it really comes off like, I want to capitalize on a cultural moment. And so therefore, whatever culture's looking for, whatever the dominant opinion is, whatever the optics are that help me sell my product, that's what I'm going to do. So there's a lot of LGBTQ advocates that are like, this was all about optics in the first place. Target, you're switching up completely. So then really, were you ever an ally, as they would say, right? Were you ever an ally, or were you just doing that to make more money and to capitalize? Now, they're a business, right? But it just doesn't come across genuine when these companies switch up now that maybe culture has shifted a bit on this topic.
Yeah, they don't seem genuine, but also they probably all went too far. They took it too far, maybe because they did have some genuine belief behind it, so they went too far. I would say, I was thinking about this, an example of a company that does seem to stay genuine is actually Chick-fil-A, who is on the opposite side of the spectrum. They always have stood behind biblical truth when it comes to homosexual relationships and all of that. And Pride Month, they just don't entertain it whatsoever. And I think while some people have boycotted because they think that's hateful or whatnot, I've always thought it makes them just seem more genuine and true
slow
to their
and steady,
values and their core beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, they haven't set themselves up by having to switch up later. They're just the same.
Yeah, and their business has only ever grown. I mean, they didn't really ever take a hit for that either. All that to say, so there's been a change in this year in culture. There's been a shift for sure. But I would say Pride Month is still very much ingrained in our culture. And this was noted by Dr. Dennison in his daily article on Tuesday. He noted that there will still be parades and rainbow flags across the month. Corporate and sports logos will display rainbows as well. For instance, here's a few examples. The MLB, while this year there's only 6 teams that actually changed their profile pictures on social media to rainbows. That's way less than in the past. There are 29 teams of the 30 that are still going to be hosting Pride Nights this month. Only the Texas Rangers have ever avoided doing a Pride Night. They've not even touched it, which is kind of interesting. Air Canada, this is interesting. Obviously not America, but they had their first ever this week. Let me get this right. They called it their first ever all 2S LGBTQIA plus flight in honor of Pride Month. If you didn't know what the 2S stands for at the beginning of that, it's two spirit, meaning they think that they've got spirits of both male and female in them. So, I mean, these companies are still going way out there and trying to do things to try to please this small segment of the population. And then specifically, Dr. Dennison called out Sesame Street when he said they are once again seeking to influence children with LGBTQ ideology. This year, their characters form a rainbow as they clasp each other's hands with the post saying, "On our street, everyone is welcome. Together, let's build a world where every person and family feels loved and respected for who they are. Happy Pride Month." So, as Dr. Dennison says, he says, as usual, their message is worded so as to make objections feel irrational or even hateful. And LGBTQ advocates are quick to disparage anyone who disagrees with it. This is true. A lot of times the wording is placed in a way or said in a way that makes you feel like you're doing something wrong if you disagree with them at all. And this is where it starts to cross the line, is when you get to kids and kids ideology and kids TV shows. I think this is what I was saying earlier about Disney. They kind of learned their lesson. People are like, stop trying to push stuff on our kids. We'll handle that. This is true with children undergoing gender-affirming therapies. The CAST report that came out in England a couple of years ago demonstrated that those are often actually damaging. Schools excluding parents from discussions about their own child's gender dysphoria, that has made people mad. A lot of those politicians were voted out this past November. And then the acceptance and celebration of trans athletes dominating women's sports has been a big outcry. And this is even like a big thing this week, as there's this high school athlete named A.B. Hernandez, who is a biological male but identifies as a female and has been doing track and field events in the female side of the sport and has been winning and won 2 state finals, basically booting the actual females from having any chance of winning anything. And that's just sad, honestly. What's interesting is Governor Gavin Newsom in California has actually called that out. He said on his podcast earlier this year that girls having to compete against boys in sports is deeply unfair. That's his words. He got a lot of ridicule for that take, even now. Anyways, Micah, there's just a lot there. What I want to hit on, though, is that while the culture is changing and while we truly believe in the biblical morality and biblical instruction of marriage as being between a man and a woman and you raise a family and all of that, this will never be a call to disparage or hate on LGBTQ people, right?
Yeah.
Last week, you and I discussed God's love for all of his children and that Christians are to love everyone, even those living in a lifestyle we disagree with. But what we can do is speak truth in love. And this is stated in Ephesians 4:15. It calls us to speak truth in love. But I do think Christians, we may have a tendency to stray away from this topic specifically, anything dealing with gender or homosexuality. We might even be tempted to just ignore June and all the pride push and just ignore it all. And that's easy to do. It's partly because it makes us uncomfortable or we're scared of being called out as a hateful person or a bigot. And those are justified things to think. But, we are called to speak truth in love. And maybe you're in a tough position specifically. If you're listening to this and you've got a family member that this is someone close to you that deals with this or that you're working through, or you work at a company where pride is a really big deal. I used to work at a company where pride was a massive push. Every June, it was a huge deal and they had all these celebrations and things. And it's hard when you're in that position as a Christian and you want to stand firm in your convictions, but you also want to love everyone around you. I would just say in those moments, it's best to just pray, ask God to lead you on how to handle that type of stuff. But Dr. Denson, he also noted that to not speak biblical truth to such a pervasive cultural issue feels wrong as well. Mm-hmm. All people, whatever their sexual orientation or gender identity, deserve to know what God says about the issues we face. We need to counter the secularizing influence of the broken culture with our children and grandchildren as well. So it got me thinking, if we don't celebrate public displays of other sins, think, greed or gluttony or drinking or even sexual domination or adultery, anything, this is all goes into heterosexual immorality as well. If we don't celebrate that stuff, why would we celebrate homosexuality, which we know the Bible regards as a sin? And gender confusion. We don't want to celebrate that. We want to help bring healing in all of that and love to these people. He makes a point that partial obedience is Satan's way of keeping us from experiencing the victorious life available only to those who belong fully to Jesus. We have to love and serve others as holistically as Jesus loves us and serves us. And that's how we reach biblical Christianity and serve and love others well. So when culture pressures believers, when culture pressures you or me or any of us listening to this to accept something that is so clearly not biblical, we are all part of a spiritual war. We're in spiritual warfare daily with this topic and with many other topics. And when you are asked by the Lord one day, what side were you on? How are you going to answer? So that's just a great way to go into this month as you think about this topic, as you think about all the implications in our culture and in your family and your friend groups, all of that, consider this. And as a side note, we mentioned this at the beginning, we've got a ton of resources at Denison Forum for this. For instance, we got an article literally just called, What Does the Bible Say About Homosexuality? And it is a deep dive into what scripture says about this entire topic. We've also got one that's called, Should I Attend a Same-Sex Wedding? That I think is really good because that is a struggle a lot of Christians have of their friends or their families getting married in a same-sex couple. And how do you go about that as a Christian? Should you go? I will link those in the show notes. But y'all, this is a big topic and it's kind of hard to deal with a lot of times as Christians, but I would encourage you to pray through it. And remember, love is far greater than hate. And we can show that through the way that we've been shown with Jesus.
Yeah. Amen, Connor. That's a very good wrap up, and that's a very good way to view this subject. The only thing that I would say that I feel like God is speaking so clearly to me right now after hearing you go through this, anything that is asking you to place your identity in fully and completely should be cast aside in the name of Jesus. If you are a born-again believer, believing that Jesus died for your sin, was resurrected from the dead, and is coming back again, and we have that eternal promise, we're sealed by the Holy Spirit in that way. If that's our identity, nothing else can take that place. And if anything is pulling on you, if your political affiliation, if your denomination, if the people that you associate with, if the LGBTQ community, if the company you work for, if anything is pulling you away from your identity and the one who gave himself up for you, if it's pulling you away from that, cast it aside. It's evil.
Yeah.
It's evil, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Our identity is in Jesus. That's it. It's in God's word. That's it. It's that simple. And that's the beautiful part. When culture gets confusing, what we believe hasn't changed. It's the same thing. It doesn't change. And I'm thankful for that today. Yeah. Connor, thank you for that. Okay, well, let's jump into another story, another great story. So let's talk about Ukraine's drone attack and its effect on modern warfare. So this is the night that Ukraine rewrote the war, Connor Jones. On June 1st, 2025, something extraordinary happened. Ukraine pulled off what is called a bold covert strike deep into Russia, launching a total of 117 drones from hidden trucks near Russian air bases, hidden months in advance for a day like June 1st.
Yeah, they're calling this like the Russian Pearl Harbor, right? Like because it was this just surprise attack that
it
destroyed
didn't have,
so much of their
it didn't
Air Force.
have the casualty
right
numbers that like Pearl Harbor had. However, this really hurts Russia in their effort, especially to strike deep into Ukraine and really just their air superiority and their superiority as a military. I'll get into this, but it took out some planes that Russia hasn't been able to produce themselves for over 10 years. These are not easily replaced. Anyway, so this was called Operation Spider's Web. The attack damaged, and I just want to get this right, 34% of Russia's cruise missile bombers and reportedly destroyed $7 billion in equipment. The drones were hidden in mobile cabins with remote-controlled roofs. So Ukrainian spies and covert ops hid these things near Russian bases deep into Russia over a long period of time for a moment like this. So Ukrainian agents had worked undetected inside Russia for months, even setting up shop near certain offices. The mission marked 29 years since Ukraine handed over strategic bombers and nuclear warheads to Russia under a promise of peace. So this was an intentional day, like 29 years to the day that they did that happened.
Well, yeah, because that was supposed to be Russia got those things from Ukraine 29 years ago, and was the promise was you're never going to attack us. And they did not stand by that. That's for sure.
And they did it on that anniversary, right? Officials say the bombers targeted were used in attacks on Ukrainian cities. One strike that happened took place over 2,600 miles from Ukraine. So the former U.S. ambassador, his name is John Herbst. Here's what he said. He called the operation a major blow to Russia's long-range strike power, and he warned that the U.S. could face similar tactics. Experts now from this are fearing that China and other adversaries of America could adopt this strategy, and they could be using drones, and they could launch them from shipping containers or farmland near U.S. bases. And one defense analyst put it this way: it's only a matter of time. Now, obviously, when this happens, fear swirls around. We know that God's in control, but it is something to think about. President Zelensky and Ukraine's spy chief oversaw the whole thing, and it took 18 months to plan. Zelensky said, and I quote, "This is what future wars will look like." He said that verbatim. For the cost of a used car, Ukraine took out some of Russia's most valuable military assets, billion-dollar bombers like the Tu-95, the Tu-22M. These aren't just planes. They are truly the backbone of Russia's long-range strike capabilities, and they are the backbone of Russia's ability to carry out long-range nuclear warfare. That's what Ukraine just took out. This is huge. I cannot overstate how shocking and huge this is and how this tips the scale. Some were destroyed, right? But others were badly damaged. In one night, a handful of cheap drones delivered a blow that decades of conventional warfare never could. What was your first reaction to this, Connor?
Man, I had a lot. I woke up on
crazy
this morning, and
I could not stop reading about this too. Yeah,
I was like on Twitter, and every 10 minutes it was a new video of like another base in Russia being just like blown up, like their planes being blown up, and like everyone was like, "What is going on? How did Ukraine pull this off?" And so I was like, "Man, this is really, really impressive that they did this." And I'm not going to offer any tactical analysis or whatnot, but I just was like, wow, what did they do? And as more details came out about how they pulled this off, because I was like, how did they get these drones 3,000 miles away? These are small drones. And it caused me to remember when Israel used those pagers to blow up a bunch of Hezbollah fighters, like these, like just kind of like cheaper, more conventional ways that, especially when you're in Ukraine's position, you're the smaller combatant here. You get in a lot of countries that are starting to pull back the weapons they're sending you. So yeah, you got to think outside the box, and you got to think smarter than your enemy. And they did that here. And they just caught Russia flat-footed. And I know Putin's really mad and upset. That's what they're saying about what's coming out of the Kremlin, is that he's just like, I mean, this is embarrassing, right? And they just lost so many planes, including ones that could potentially nuke other countries like the U.S. if they want, like,
which is what I was saying,
nuclear warhead planes that would.
It took out their long-range capability to wage nuclear warfare against their enemies who are farther away. So, so this actually segues perfectly into Russia's reaction of this, because I want to cover this. This is devastating for the Kremlin. This is devastating for Putin. These bombers aren't easily replaced, and as I said, haven't been built, some of them in decades. Russian generals are now scrambling, not just to patch up their losses, but they're having to rethink their entire defense strategy. Air defenses could not stop $400 drones, and now the world knows it. So this hit deep, not just an equipment loss, but kind of confidence shaken within the country, but outside of the country, that a large superpower like this could be attacked on such a large scale. And then Ukraine's message, it wasn't just military action. This was a psychological attack on Russia. Oh, yeah. Small but mighty type of thing. Ukraine is outmanned, outgunned, under-equipped, have a lot less money, just showed the world it can still hit hard. And so they did it while international aid is slowing down, while a lot of people are questioning Ukraine's role in this, and we're not getting into that right now. It's just, this is really interesting, and it really flips this war on its head. This is quite the impressive feat. And I'm thinking about when Ukraine did this. Connor, what do you think? I mean, when I was reading this, I was like, what is Russia going to do? Like, this is the type of thing where it does feel like Russia has, for some reason, not just gone all out, like just put all their soldiers on the front line and just march right into Kiev in Ukraine. That's my initial reaction when this happened is Putin just about to go scorched earth and just burn everything down?
I've been reading some experts.
Because he's embarrassed,
He's embarrassed.
And you talked about it last week. He's a very prideful man, He's
very prideful. He cares so much about strength, and this makes him look weak, and he's not going to like that. So how will he show some sort of strength? That I don't know, and I don't know when it will happen. Hopefully it doesn't. What's interesting is this attack happened like the day before they were meeting for another round of peace talks in Turkey. The two sides were supposed to be having a talk, and they did go meet. I don't think
like the next day. It happened like the next day. That was probably awkward. You ever been in an awkward meeting before?
Ukraine maybe did it at this timing. I know you said it was an anniversary, but also intentionally, like as another leverage point. And people were talking about how Trump, when they had that Oval Office spat, said you don't have the cards, but people are like, maybe Zelensky has more cards in his back pocket like this that he knew were coming down the line.
No one seemed to expect this.
Yeah, and what else do they have planned? If this is a year and a half of planning, maybe they've got something else. I don't know. The whole thing reminds me of anytime you read the stories of like a David versus Goliath type of war situation. Think, for instance, the U.S. colonies when they were fighting the British military. They had to just be guerrilla warfare almost. They had to change the style of fighting to win against the world's most powerful navy and military in Great Britain, right? So that's what Ukraine's trying to do here. It is a really just impressive feat. And it is a good question. What will Russia do in response? And that I'm just unsure.
Well, so, I mean, the future of warfare just shifted right before our very eyes.
Right. Definitely.
NATO countries are watching closely. China's watching closely. Every military planner, every person in charge of every military in the world, from Washington to Tehran, the age of drones isn't coming. It's here. And it's funny, drones have been around for a while, right? Like you think of them as like new technology, but they've actually been around for a while. But the use of some cheap drones just humiliated one of the world's largest militaries. And so here's what this means for us. Like, here's what I'm thinking about just kind of as a country. So the U.S. faces a complex moment. Some commentators are viewing this as a bold new strategy, but, It's a bold new strategy, and Ukraine needed to do it for their own nation's sovereignty. There's a lot of people raising up the alarms right now saying, like, this is going to bring some serious escalation within this conflict and beyond. And AI, Connor, I'm thinking about AI as we're going to be diving more into that this summer with certain topics as that continues to progress. Not only as AI is threatening jobs or AI is, a part of, engaging in modern warfare, there's a lot to that topic. And as AI gets more involved, we're going to see it progress. Connor, how's all this going to play out?
I really don't know.
Do you have the answer?
I don't have the answer. What I can say is, and I keep harping on it, like just the ingenuity here. Did you even mention that the trucks that these drones flew out of, they then self-destructed?
No, I didn't mention that, but I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. They were timed to then blow up so that the Russians couldn't even figure out how they did that. The whole thing is just very interesting. I don't know how it's going to plan out, and I don't think any of us do. What we do know is obviously God is sovereign and providential.
Amen,
and you're
bro.
right. This changes modern warfare. Now the U.S. has to be really on top of things, watching our own borders or our own land. I know one thing that people have been pointing out is that China owns so much land in America that what prevents them from bringing in containers that just look like regular containers and loading them with drones that could attack something, or doing that with Taiwan or Iran doing this over in the Middle East, or even smaller guerrilla groups pulling something off like this, or like the Houthis, right? There's so many different things to consider here. It even got me thinking about, remember in December, the drones over New Jersey that were freaking everybody out?
Yeah.
The government, Trump's administration came out and said that those were friendly. That might be true, but it just like the way that it freaked everybody out for a couple of weeks there when people were like, what are these drones flying over the East Coast and over these airports? If this is what they can do, and this is maybe without much AI help right now, where's this going? I don't know.
Yeah, and our goal in talking about that is just more trying to take these topics and, make them relevant to us, like understand that this could have implications for the future. But nearly every story you hear, it's, if this continues to escalate, it means the end of the world. This is a tale as old as time. So Connor, you had a really good point to remember that we don't know how all this is going to pan out with this situation or any other situation that we talk about, but we do know who holds each of these situations in his hands. And we do trust and we do believe that God is providential and that he is sovereign. So this past Friday, Dr. Ryan Dennison wrote the Dennison Forum article. It was entitled, "Could American Sanctions Bring an End to the War in Ukraine?" His spiritual application on this really inspired me as I was thinking about the story and as I was researching and writing this. It hit home for me in the same way, and I hope it does for all of you listening as well. Operation Spiderweb is one of the boldest military moves we've seen in this war. Ukraine just used cheap drones and strategic creativity. It wasn't about raw power, and they damaged Russia's elite bomber fleet. It was unexpected. Connor, it was smart and it worked. It's a reminder that outcomes, the point that I'm trying to make, don't always follow human logic. And that's not just true in war. That's true in life. That's true in our lives. We love predictability. We crave it. I crave it. We want plans that make sense, that we can map out. We want our plans to fit neatly into a spreadsheet or to a list. But God, he doesn't always work that way, right? And we live in a sinful, fallen world, and it doesn't always work that way. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us to trust in the Lord with all your heart, not leaning on your own understanding, and always acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. That sounds simple until life throws you into the unknown, until you're asked to obey without clarity, until God asks you to move without knowing what the next step is going to entail, without knowing what that exact next step is. But this is the pattern of Scripture too. Like we can, as believers, draw on the pattern of Scripture. God shows up in unexpected ways through weak people, through strange strategies, through last minute, last second breakthroughs. And his plans often flip our assumptions upside down. It takes trust in him first and foremost. So what do we do with that? Here's the real question. Where in your life are you still trying to control the outcome? I'm going to venture to say there's not one single person listening to this that isn't trying to control some sort of outcome in their life. If I was to boil human nature down into something, I would say our need to control the unexpected, our desire to control every outcome that we can. Maybe it's your career, maybe it's your family, maybe it's your calling, maybe it's your timeline, maybe you're waiting for everything to make sense before you take that next faith step. But what if God is asking you to take the next step in faith before it feels safe, before you know the answer? Ask yourself these questions. Am I depending more on my strategy than God's guidance? Do I really believe is working, even when I don't understand the path? And what's one area where I need to let go and trust him more deeply today? Ukraine didn't wait to be fully resourced. They moved with what they had. And sometimes that's exactly how God works with us, works through us, works in us and on us. Not once everything is perfect, but in the middle of the mess, in the middle of the struggle, faith isn't about feeling strong. It's not about that. It's about trusting the one who is strong and who is able.
Great stuff, Micah. Yeah, it's a big topic. We're constantly seeing new things happening in global conflicts all around the world. So recognizing everything that you just said about where our faith stands and where sovereignty lies, it's, a sense of hope in these big unquestionable things, like, or really, I guess, questionable things, like where is this all headed?
Yeah.
And where are the different things headed in our own personal lives? Only God knows, and just resting in that.
Well,
it's
yeah,
peaceful.
I mean, and like we've talked about several times, like we can invite God into teaching us and redeeming our news consumption. Like, don't feel bad that God might wire you. Like, if you're listening to this podcast, you want to know what's happening in the world, and you want to know what God's redemptive plan is through all of these difficult situations and circumstances. We talk about the biggest stories. Well, guess what? The biggest stories are oftentimes scary and unpredictable. We would love to come in here and talk about just great stuff all the time. Like, wouldn't that be fun and easier, Connor? Right? But ultimately, we have to remember that we don't have all the answers, but we know who does have the answers, and that we're able to invite God into the consumption of the news and current events and say, God, what are you teaching me through this? How can I apply this to my own life? And guys, we're just excited that you're jumping in on this journey with us.
Yeah. This is so true. And sometimes we do get the fun stories. Those are fun too. When we're talking about football
exactly.
Or, movies or something. But yeah, we got to hit on the big things too. Okay, Micah, thank you for that. But I think it's time to jump into this game that you came up with. What did you say it's called?
Yeah, so we're going to call this Would You Rather with Micah and CJ. Is it cool if I call you CJ? I said nickname pending approval.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we need a copyright or a trademark on it or something. But
okay, we'll talk about it.
It's my initials. You could also, it's fine.
Okay, yeah, I could also just call you Connor, or maybe
that works too. Yeah,
Mr. Jones.
Sure.
Okay, cool. All right. So what I'm going to do is we just have a few questions prepared. I prepared them. I didn't think much about this beforehand, other than I found some good ones. I came up with a couple of ones. Connor has not looked at these yet, and so we're just going to answer these would you rathers real quick. So, all right, Connor, first one. Would you rather have to announce every thought out loud or never be able to speak again?
I don't know, man. That's tough. It's a
tough one.
I really do like to talk, but I also really like to think, and you just never know where your thoughts are going sometimes. So, gosh, I'd probably have to say this. I'd rather not speak, probably. I can still write.
Again?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's tough. Okay, so you're saying never able to speak again. I would actually say I would rather announce every thought out loud.
I guess it would check your thoughts for sure.
I was about to say, because, we're called to renew our minds in Christ, I would probably cause some major damage for the first few years after this change of announcing every single thought that pops into my head. It would damage relationships in my life and all kinds of things, right? But over time, I think maybe I'd get used to it and I'd be able to just think completely normal thoughts and think completely nice thoughts all the time. Maybe that's wishful thinking.
People would realize just how often my brain just sits empty too. Like, men are just, the way we're wired is like, we'll either get really into something or we just sit and there's like just nothing happening. It's
sure. I just think, oh man, yeah, that would be tough. Okay, cool. All right, next one. Would you rather always have a pebble in your shoe? So would you rather always have a pebble in your shoe? Always. Or always feel like you would have to sneeze, but never could?
What?
Oh that's a tough one.
Dude, the feeling of a sneeze coming is the worst, especially when you can't actually get the sneeze out.
Yeah.
So I may have to go with the pebble because I feel like you'd at least get used to that. I don't know if I could ever get used to the sneeze thing.
I am in total agreement with you on this. They both sound awful because, Lord willing, we're on this earth for a lot longer. And so, a constant pebble in your shoe, oh my goodness, that you could just never find or never get rid of. But man, that feeling, those few seconds before you have to sneeze, that stops everything, doesn't it? So yes, I agree with you.
You can't even open your eyes fully, and you feel like you can't breathe.
You wouldn't even be able to operate. You would always feel like you have to sneeze, but never can. Oh man, you want to talk about hell on earth? That would just be awful.
Some of the worst things on the planet is when you're like driving and you're having this like prepped up sneeze coming, and you can't see the road because your eyes are like starting to water, like. And then if you do end up having a full sneeze attack in the car, I'm like, man, this is kind of sketchy going 75 down the highway.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, last one. Would you rather your listeners hear your unedited bloopers or have to do a live episode with no script?
Is this like for this podcast?
Yeah, for us, man. Oh. Yep. Mm-hmm. So would you rather
I feel like we could
your listeners hear your unedited bloopers or have to do a live episode with no script?
So to clarify, we don't necessarily have a script for this show already. Yeah. We have an outline that gives us, we've got some of our notes written down, all of that, but it's not a script. So I think we could go completely off book, have no outline, and maybe take questions or something. I'd rather do that than bloopers.
Totally.
If you got the bloopers,
totally agree with you on that.
Hear my weird coughing fits and stuff like that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. We don't often have to edit our episodes much, which, I know we're so great, right? But it really is just like a conversation. And so I would say an episode with nothing prepared, no outline, I think that'd be pretty fun because then it would be like a live audience thing and we could just kind of talk about like whatever came up. I think that'd be great. It would just be like you and I sitting down to talk about anything.
Yeah, that'd be fun, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you for playing Would You Rather with Micah and CJ.
How do we determine if somebody won?
Well, Connor, not everything's a competition.
Dang.
But if it was, I'd win.
You don't want to know my thoughts right now. Good thing I chose the other answer.
Look, you did choose to never speak again.
Okay. Let's real fast mention the mailbag. As we always say, we want to continue to hear from you all. Please send us your questions, thoughts. Send us your would you rather question. We'll answer it. We'd be happy to. Send anything to us at culturebrief@denisenforum.org or go follow us on Instagram at Culture Brief Podcast, where we are posting all kinds of stuff and having fun over there on the Instagram channel. And we'd love to hear from you guys. And leave us some comments too.
Please do.
Vote on our polls. Yeah, everything. So that being said, that's mailbag mention for this week. We're also going to give you guys some things to check into that we've been talking about in past weeks. Here's where several things stand. So last week, Micah, you discussed the rise of antisemitism and different attacks that have happened in the U.S. Sadly, this past weekend, there was another attack in Boulder, Colorado, where a man named Muhammad Solomon threw incendiary devices at people that were walking in this peace walk. They were just trying to raise awareness for the hostages still being held by Hamas in Israel. And this was a Jewish group doing this walk. This guy walks up and throws Molotov cocktails and his own homemade flamethrower and tries to catch people on fire. He does end up burning some people. There were 13 injuries, mostly older individuals aged between 52 to 88. One of them was even a Holocaust survivor. Just awful, man. I hate to hear this. He is an Egyptian who overstayed a visa. So now it's become a whole immigration debate about different people that were allowed to stay in the previous presidential administration to where it all goes now. His family has now been detained by ICE. So like this is just tragic on so many levels. I hate it. Thankfully, nobody has passed away, but I can't imagine being literally set on fire and the just injury that is.
Yeah, I mean, these stories just continue to become more prevalent. Like no matter if you agree with the stance or not, it is a core tenet of this country to be able to assemble freely and to be able to stand for what it is that you believe in. So these people on a literal peace walk for innocent people who are being held hostage by Hamas. I mean, it's tragic, but you know what? Unfortunately, it's just not surprising. As we touched on last week, there really has been a surge in anti-Semitism, and I just pray that this doesn't continue somehow, some way. Well, let's talk about Elon. What's going on with Elon right now? So Elon,
Mr.
first
Musk?
of all, Elon Musk. He's done with DOGE. Okay. So we've mentioned that before, and I know that many of you have heard that. He's done with DOGE. He's returning back to his normal duties, but he stepped down after 130 days, and then he's saying that DOGE became a whipping boy for bureaucracy as a whole, which, I mean, is true. For better, for worse, no matter what you stand on the subject, it did become kind of the blame game for everybody. He's now refocusing on his AI company, Neuralink, and Tesla, as all are facing pressure and all are seeing falling profits.
Yeah, this was like a mutual breakup, right? Because he was kind of a liability for the White House, and the Trump administration was like, okay, he's actually damaging us
they weren't good
more.
for each other. Yeah, I mean, it just became clear that they weren't good for each other anymore, that it just wasn't.
Two very ego-driven, very wealthy, powerful men. They're going to act like friends, but they were always going to butt heads at some point. So this felt like it was the White House saying, thank you for helping us, now leave because you're just a liability, and Elon being called back really to his companies by his board saying, you got to get back here because they're all tanking.
Yeah, so Elon steps away, everything becomes official, they have a moment, in the Oval Office, Trump gifts him something, and then he goes on his way. And then he comes out and he puts on X, and I'll spare you the whole details of the tweet or whatever you call it. But he did call this mega bill that Trump is pushing that we've talked about before a disgusting pork-filled abomination. Disgusting pork-filled abomination. Trump's big, beautiful bill just passed the House, and it's facing scrutiny in the Senate. So this is a pivotal time for this bill. It includes major tax cuts like eliminating taxes on tip and overtime, $150 billion more for defense, $50 billion more for border wall, and strict reforms, strict cuts to Medicaid and food aid, and that's a lot of where the debate is raging on. Supporters are saying it boosts workers and national security, but a lot of critics are saying, including some Republicans and Elon Musk, that it could explode the national deficit. So the Senate has to decide by July 4th, but Elon coming out and saying that is surprising and isn't at the same time, because the whole point of DOGE is to decrease the deficit. And so I guess Elon just felt like he could come out and say that now that he's not a part of the administration anymore.
Yeah, he's very much so like cut costs everywhere, but at the same time, this is going exactly against what Trump is trying to get passed.
Yeah.
And now Elon's teaming up with Rand Paul, who's a senator from Kentucky, who's very big on cutting government spending. And Trump at the same time is like bashing Rand Paul on Truth Social. So, they're butting heads. I mean, we may be headed down a big political like showdown between these two. So I don't know. We'll just see. But I will say one thing that people called out is, of course, Elon's going to say this too, because the bill takes away some of the electric vehicle credits that helps Tesla make much bigger profits. There's tax credits when you buy a Tesla. This bill strips those away, saying we're not going to allow you to get money for buying an electric vehicle. So Elon's seeing that as well. So is he seeing this from a business perspective or actually government spending and cutting? I don't know.
No one is without bias, man. No one is without bias, especially people in those positions. And Elon is definitely biased. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Michael, here's a few things to tune into this upcoming week. Tonight, if you're listening on Thursday, we've got the NBA Finals are starting, so we will get a crown champion here the next couple weeks. This is going to be between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers. Game 1 is at 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central. It's best out of 7 games. Micah, quick prediction. Who do you think is going to win, and what's the record going to be?
First of all, I think the NBA is probably upset about this matchup.
Definitely.
Because this is small market. This is small market versus small market. 2 of the smallest markets in the NBA. Indiana, the greater Indianapolis area versus Oklahoma City. You know what I mean?
And no real massive star. I mean, they've got some stars on these teams.
I mean, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's pretty big, and then Tyrese Halliburton for the Pacers. But yeah, you're right. Like nobody who's typically mentioned in like the top 3.
No Steph Curry. Yeah.
No Luka. You know?
Well, yeah.
Right. Okay, I'm going to say the Pacers in 6. I think they're a more established team. OKC's still young. I do think OKC is going to win some championships in the future. I just don't think this is their time.
Okay, I'm going the opposite. OKC wins 4 games to Indiana's 1. They're going to dominate.
So OKC in 5. Okay.
They're the more talented team. They are younger, but they've got more talent. Assuming everybody stays healthy, OKC in 5. Okay. Stanley Cup Finals also starting. They started technically Wednesday night. So if you're listening on Thursday, you already know the result of game 1. We're recording just before that game starts. So we do not have the result quite yet, but that's also best out of 7. Micah, you got a prediction there?
Yeah, that's Florida Panthers versus the Edmonton Oilers. It's kind of been
I should have mentioned that.
It's kind of been a joke that a Canadian NHL team has not won the Stanley Cup since 1993.
Right.
That's what's so interesting, right? Like the country that literally came up with the game of hockey hasn't had a winning NHL team that actually won it all since 93. I'm actually picking the Edmonton Oilers. They just knocked out my Stars. The Panthers won last year. I just would rather see a different winner, and I think Canada needs a win right now. So let's go Edmonton Oilers in 5.
I got the Florida Panthers in 7. They are probably the better team here, but it would be cool to see a Canadian team win. Maybe. Actually, I kind of like that America just dominates in their sport.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
Yes.
Even though it's mostly Canadians on the teams, even in America.
Yes. One final thing that we want you as the audience of Culture Brief to tune into. The McDonald's snack wraps are back on July 10th. Get ready, people. An affordable snack wrap that you can drive through, order on the mobile app, and you can get yourself a snack wrap. I think they're going to be like $3 or something like that. It's a crispy tender with cheese and lettuce, and then you can choose your sauce. It's only going to be crispy. Back in the day, the snack wraps you could order grilled as well. So just FYI, they're coming back on July 10th for anybody who's excited about that.
If you're excited about that, good for you. Personally, I'm just like, okay, I don't know what these snack wraps are. But anyways, thank you all for tuning in to Culture Brief this week. Thank you for joining us. And we will post all the articles, videos, any images that we mentioned in our show notes. They're all going to be linked there. Some of our books on homosexuality will be in there as well this week. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, or rate and review the show. And share it with a friend that you think could enjoy it or use some of the resources that we're talking about. And we will see you next Thursday.
See ya.